world, U.S. Central Command, U.S. response to the Iranian strike that killed 2 American service members. Obviously, the tit-for-tat strikes have expanded. Now we're getting to the adult news, okay? Everyone, hold on to your butts. We've gotten to the, real news and information, and the right is not coping well with this, okay? Since this news came out, there's actually 4 killed in action, and I believe more that are missing in action as well. CENTCOM has identified CENTCOM announced that there are unidentified remains of the missing soldier was found, and that another soldier was killed during a controlled explosion of an unexploded Shahed in northern Iraq yesterday. CENTCOM announces that 2 more soldiers were killed, and 1 is missing as a result of an Iranian strike in Jordan yesterday. There are a number of injuries as well. This is not just in Jordan. However, there's some in Iraq. The IRGC strikes are actually far more successful in the way that the American side is presented initially. And this is causing a lot of panic amongst the right. Obviously, we are not oblivious to this reality because we have working brains in this fucking community, and we've been watching this stuff unfold for the longest time. And clearly, a lot of Republicans, on the other hand, are who have, I guess, been deluded by the way Trump has presented it, are going, what the fuck is happening? What the fuck is going on? We thought that the IRGC's capabilities were destroyed. It doesn't seem like it's fucking destroyed. How are they actually doing this? That's the real question. Maria Bartiromo on Fox News said this as well. Here's Bartiromo. Here's Bartiromo bringing up this point right here. We'll start with Matt Wansvoll first. I'm confused. The USA has the most powerful military on earth. We're bombed the hell out of Iran for 4 months. Trump says the Air Force, Navy, and nearly all their missile capabilities are destroyed. So how is Iran still capable of hitting U.S. bases right now? Hey, man, perhaps it's because Trump has been fucking lying. Perhaps that's the reason. Has that ever been a fucking factor in this equation? We've been telling you this whole time. This is a healthy exercise, I guess, for you to recognize what's actually going on. Trump has been lying this whole time, okay? Of course he's been lying. He's lied every day of his life. And he will lie tomorrow. He lied yesterday. He's lying today. He's going to lie tomorrow as well. He's a fucking pathological liar. And a lot of you are dumb fucks who I guess want to believe him or believe him because you think he's fantastic. He's the real one. He's defending your interests or whatever. But he's lying.
CENTCOM says that there will be outsized action in retaliation, but I don't understand how it's possible that Iran has the capabilities to fight this way and continue to try to lash out at Gulf countries and U.S. military bases, because the U.S. has obliterated Iran's military, and the president continues to reiterate that.
Yes, and if you look at the numbers of missiles that they've been able to fire off from the beginning of this war, late February, early March, and what they're able to do now, it is very seriously degraded. They've gone from over 100.
This is why the lies continue, by the way. This is how you continue the narrative. Oh, no, it's been seriously degraded. Oh, really? Oh, really? How much longer can you continue doing this, man? How much longer can Fox News continue with this fucking narrative? Here, I'll give you a dumber example of this, right? A sillier example that you may have seen on the internet. Odyssey. Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Homer's Odyssey. Republicans and right-wingers, right-wing sloppulists have talked about how shit this movie is for fucking months. Why is it shit? Because there's a trans man in it. There's a black woman playing Helen of Troy. They've been losing their fucking minds. Well, it turns out it's actually awesome. People love it. It's a fucking major hit. Of course it's a major hit. It's a masterpiece is what people are saying. And now they're like, what? Why won't people hate on this like I did before watching the fucking movie? I don't know, maybe because most normal people aren't fucking morons like you that don't just go, oh my God, a black woman is Helen of Troy. I hate this. Boycott the fucking movie. They're so stupid. This is where the alternative reality that right-wingers construct meet the actual reality on the ground. This is where right-wingers are reminded that they're actually the can't shut the fuck up minority, okay? They're not the silent majority. They're just a majority of the voices that people unfortunately hear because of our base-boosted, right-wing slanted algorithms, okay? When the expectation finally meets reality, all of a sudden right-wingers are supposed to have a reality check. Many of them don't even do that, though. But there are so many different versions of this. This is the entire fucking ecosystem now on the internet. It's so fucking annoying. Haramkar says the irony of the right-wing Odyssey controversy is that it can only be recast so easily because the West treats European history as universalized while everything else is specific and ethnic. The right can never be happy because they want it to be both white and universal at once. But yeah, it's a silly aside, but it's the same exact principle. From something as dumb as my expectations of the Odyssey movie is that it's going to fucking suck because there's like literally a 5-second Elliot Page moment in the entire thing versus how normal people perceive it, where they go, I don't give a shit about this. Yeah, Christopher Nolan has canceled all screenings of the Odyssey with movie influencers. He's only allowing approved critics to see it in advance. He's waving the surrender flag. They know that they have a financial disaster on their hands. Elon Musk, how pathetic. Yeah, it turns out Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is now heading to record-breaking $117 million domestic opening weekend, shattering initial projections of 90 million to 100 million. Like, what are we doing? Why do you want to live like this? That's the question I have. Why do you want to live like this? Who wants to live in this alternative universe where you're constantly angry, where you're constantly mad all the fucking time? You're constantly scared. You're constantly deluding yourself into believing that the world is supposed to be a certain way. Yeah, it's 257 million actually in its worldwide opening weekend. This is what I don't get. Okay, I know we moved on from Iran to the Odyssey, but it follows the same trend line. Right-wingers construct an alternative reality in which everyone actually feels the same resentments that they do, and they constantly try to get others on board with feeling said resentment. Whereas most normal people don't have that opinion. Yeah, I don't think it's a great thing that critics are able to manufacture a consensus on media like this, says Asmongold. I don't think it's a great thing that critics are able to preemptively manufacture a consensus on media like this, especially when this movie has so many hot-button social issues tied into it that critics refuse to address. Critics now offer propaganda rather than insight. I don't think it's a great thing that critics are able to manufacture a consensus on media like this. Yeah, you're just mad that you couldn't manufacture a consensus ahead of time. That's it. Thank God most people in the fucking real world don't give a shit about these idiotic assumptions. It's so stupid. It's so fucking dumb. Just eat the goddamn L and sit the fuck down. Hopefully this is a learning moment for you. Stop trying to farm outrage about pieces of art that haven't even come out yet. How many fucking times do these guys have to fall flat on their faces over and over again? And the same thing goes for Iran. The same thing happens on a much grander scale with Donald Trump. Okay? The same thing happens on a much grander scale with Donald Trump and the way that he's covering, the way that he is basically trafficking in nonsense on a daily basis. We're destroying Iran. We've destroyed Iran. There's a peace deal that Iran is begging to put together every fucking week. And his fan base, his cult, Trump's cult, eats it up. And yet, real world events are unfolding all around us. And unfortunately for right wingers, what Donald Trump says can move markets. But ultimately, you can't out-yap reality to this degree. Because eventually, troops are going to fucking die. And when that happens, you're going to be like, how did that happen? Why are troops dying? We're the most powerful military on the fucking planet. How is this taking place?
Overnight, the U.S. launching new strikes on Iran, retaliation for the drone and missile attack that killed 2 American service members and injured several others at a base in Jordan Saturday. One service member is still missing. In these new American strikes, CENTCOM saying the U.S., quote, targeted Islamic Revolutionary Guard forces that launched those attacks in Jordan. Video circulating online appears to show multiple projectiles raining down from the night sky. The moment that base was hit, 4 injured service members were taken to hospitals in Jordan and later released. Several others suffered minor injuries and have returned to duty. So far in this war, 16 American troops have been killed and more than 400 wounded, according to the Department of Defense. These latest combat deaths are the first reported since the fighting restarted. Responding to word of the deadly attack, President Trump reportedly telling the New York Post, quote, it's a shame, but in this case, they died because they don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon, and they don't want to see the Middle East blown up. The attack came after 7 straight days of U.S. strikes on Iranian targets, including surveillance sites and military logistics infrastructure. Both sides now say the ceasefire agreed in mid-June is over. Iran, meanwhile, has been targeting its neighbors, launching missiles and drones at American bases in Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait. Those strikes raising questions about the status of American missile defense. It's estimated that the war is severely depleting critical U.S. munitions, including for the Patriot missile batteries crucial to protecting American troops and allies. But just last month, Secretary Hegseth dismissed reports of any shortages.
Ultimately, our stockpiles are great, and they'll only get stronger.
The U.S. has now carried out strikes on Iranian targets for 8 straight days. And several countries have condemned the Iranian strikes and are calling for restraint. But for now, Rachel, it seems there is no end in sight.
Yeah, 140 days into this conflict. Okay, Marcus, thank you. The escalating tensions between the U.S. and Iran, well, it's sending gas prices up again. ABC's Christian Cordero joins us now with the numbers. Good morning.
Hey there, Rachel. Good morning. So gas prices are rising with the tension around the Strait of Hormuz, where a fifth of the global oil supply passes through. U.S. oil is trading at $82.47, up about 4.5%, while the national average for a gallon of regular gas in the U.S. is now $3.98, according to Gas Buddy, a 14-cent increase from last week's average and $1 more expensive compared to when the war began. This is all coinciding with the busy summer travel season and the lack of traffic moving through the Strait of Hormuz. This morning, Iranian state media reports the regime intercepted 4 ships in the strait today, warning those waiting to pass that they must directly coordinate with the IRGC. Data from maritime analytics firm Kepler shows ship traffic dropping significantly, as low as single digits in recent days, compared to about 70 ships that crossed per day during the temporary memorandum of understanding, and roughly 100 per day before the war began. Our team has spoken with shipping executives who have vessels waiting.
I've explained this to you guys already. There's only so much out-yapping you can do, but you can't out-yap how people feel in their wallets. Okay? Obviously, the Trump administration, alongside the rest of the world, has tried to keep up with the imminent energy crisis by unleashing their strategic petroleum reserves. But there is going to be a hard limit to how much you can try to manage the imminent volatility. Okay? It's at a certain point, everything is going to collapse when people realize, like, okay, market factors are actually not looking at the hard limit with this actual commodity that is necessary for survival, right? It's going to happen. It's already beginning to happen regardless, because there's like obviously supply shortages that are compounding, right? And it's going to lead to, and it has led to, an inflationary crisis anyway.
To cross, they say they want more clarity before they feel safe enough to move ships through. And until the bottlenecking eases, Gio, analysts say gas prices will keep going up.
Yeah, such a back and forth on these gas prices. Christiane, thank you so much.
Well, moments ago, President Trump posting to Truth Social with this message on Iran, saying Republicans should add Iran to the Russian sanctions bill. That's what Lindsey wanted to do, referencing the late Senator Lindsey Graham.
It comes after the deaths of 2 American service members in Jordan.
Mike Tobin is live in Tel Aviv with the latest. Mike.
And Lisa, and guys, let me start you out with some breaking news. Air raid sirens are sounding right now because Iranian missiles are inbound for the Jordanian town of Aqaba. Why Aqaba is particularly concerning? It's at the tip of the Red Sea, right where Israel and Jordan come together. So Giganik.
Slowly but surely, the IRGC missiles have been able to successfully take out a lot of the batteries, a lot of the anti-air defense systems inside of Jordan. Jordan is obviously very important for Israeli security. Jordan is basically the last line of defense. In the last 130 days in the Epstein Fury, Operation Epstein Fury, Iran successfully took out the radar installations, the eyes and the ears that the Americans had in the entire region that would play a formative role in the Israeli response, in Israeli air defenses. Right? But of course, after they took out the radars, they started taking out the batteries. They started taking out the offensive strike capabilities, but more importantly, from the Israeli perspective, the defensive strike capabilities. And as of this week, the IRGC has hyper-focused on the Jordanian defenses. Jordan operated as a key hub, says Murtaza Hussein, for executing the February 28 attack on Iran, and also seemed to have specific detail on the type of operation it would be, including the killing of Iranian leaders and attempts at regime change. It would be more respectable to just own the conflict than attempting to deny the obvious or acting like an innocent bystander. This goes equally for the other GCC states that have been involved in the war. This is, of course, in response to Ali Yunus's reporting. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi denied publicly days ago that the U.S. has a military base in Jordan, a line that has been repeated by other officials in government media. It's not clear why Jordan keeps denying the existence of a U.S. military base the U.S. built with its own money publicly. And this has, of course, gotten Israel nervous. Argentina received a red card. Oh, hell yeah. Get fucked, Argentina. Fucking finally doing Taekwondo for 70 minutes. People in Israel are getting more anxious than usual now, especially after the strikes on the border with Jordan. Amir Bohbat is reporting that the defense establishment is expecting a missile attack from Iran. This could also just mean that Israel is preparing to attack Iran. Okay? Israel has made it, Israel put a no-fly zone for drone operators, commercial, civilian, across the board recently. That means they're expecting possible drones as well, beyond ballistic munitions. This is a big deal. As I reported yesterday, the reason why they're attacking Jordan is because they're making it easier. They're making Israel more vulnerable, okay? They're making Israel more vulnerable because they expect Israel to possibly join with the United States of America post-MOU as they did prior to the MOU. Because right now, up until now, America has been striking. Israel's been awfully quiet. Israel hasn't actually accompanied the American strikes on Iran. But Iran is basically creating an environment where they can retaliate against Israel if they see it necessary, if they see it to be a necessity. And that's the reason why they took out the air defenses in Jordan. That's the reason why they've been pummeling the Jordanian bases. And that's the reason why Americans died in Jordan. Now, one might ask the question, why the fuck are American troops stationed in Jordan that are playing defense for Israel? But, you know, I think we all know the answer to that question, right?
Anything that threatens Aqaba threatens Israel as well. To this point,
I gotta pee.
The Iranians have not fired on Israel in this round of fighting. But as you mentioned, an 8th round of airstrikes has now concluded in Iran. U.S. strikes in Iran. The military operation now amplified by the 2 U.S. servicemen killed, a 3rd missing, and 4 wounded. These are the first U.S. troops killed since that memorandum of understanding was signed. The casualties were at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, and they're a result of Iran's repeated shots at U.S. bases in neighboring countries. At least one strike got through the defenses. The Institute for Study of War writes Iran has enhanced their ballistic missiles with greater speed and maneuverability, and that the Revolutionary Guard is getting some help from Russia and China. Now, as fighters launched from aircraft carriers, Tomahawk cruise missiles blasted off from warships, U.S. Central Command stated that this 8th round of strikes was intended to punish the Revolutionary Guard forces who launched the attacks that killed the U.S. service members in Jordan. Now, President Trump, speaking to the New York Post, said those servicemen who sacrificed their lives did it because they don't want to see Iran get a nuclear weapon, and it just shows you how bad they, the Iranians, are. To this point, the majority of targets have focused on disabling ports, destroying the ability of port towns to resupply, and preventing the Revolutionary Guard from threatening shipping. Dramatic evidence of that, a tower destroyed in the port town of Khabakar. The U.S. says the Revolutionary Guards used that tower to track ships and attack them in the Strait. Now, since this war with Iran began, 16 U.S. service members have lost their lives. 430 have been wounded. Guys, back to you.
All right.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you,
Thanks, Mike.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube.
Obviously, we're going to continue situation monitoring. However, Jake Tapper had Abdullah Sayed on. That's another situation that we will be monitoring today. But so far, there's also some additional developments. Iran's getting a little frisky because of the confidence that they have. There are some Iranian analysts that are now talking about entertaining strikes, or not even strikes, but an offensive operation, an invasion, if you will, on Kuwait. And for the record, since the news came out about the 2 soldiers that were died, a 3rd service member was reported to be dead.
I've got to
This is the 8th night of successive strikes.
Give you an update
back
on
and
the
forth.
loss of life of U.S. service members. We reported earlier that 2 U.S. service members had been killed and a 3rd was missing. The remains of that 3rd missing U.S. service member have been recovered. So you're talking about 3 people killed by that strike. And another unfortunate incident, service members were disposing of the explosives in an Iranian attack drone with a controlled explosion. Something went wrong, and another U.S. service member was killed.
God damn.
All of this according to Central Command.
200 gifted
last night,
subs.
the U.S.
Thank you.
responded to the U.S. loss of life with an intensified round of strikes into Iran. This marks the first time the U.S. has had any loss of life since that memorandum of understanding was signed, the memorandum of understanding which is now largely disregarded. The casualties were at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, and they are a result of Iran's repeated shots at U.S. bases in neighboring countries. At least one strike got through the defenses. Now, the Institute...
I mean, these guys are just straight up dying for Israel. Just make no mistake. Like, there's no clearer example of dying for Israel than sitting in a fucking base in Jordan that is playing a formative role in striking Iran and also playing a formative role in defending Israel. That is straight up what this is. Trump is sending these people and lighting the region on fire. Trump is sending these people to their deaths because he wants to lean into whatever Israel's demands are, destabilizing a sovereign nation that has the capability of fighting back. Germany and Britain are evacuating their diplomats from Kuwait, by the way, since there's some reporting. And obviously the strikes are ongoing. It hasn't stopped. Reports of missile and drone launches towards Bahrain, Kuwait, Erbil, and Iraq. A U.S. soldier was killed last night during the same type of attack in Erbil. There's extensive damage on these bases, and Germany and Britain are evacuating their diplomats from Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The U.S. has advised its citizens to leave the Middle East region. A lot of indications that massive escalations are being prepared. And Israel is also preparing for additional strikes on Israeli soil as well. Here is Trita Parsi on the issue. Says, to say that the U.S. underestimated Iran's missile capabilities is only half true. Yes, there was an underestimation, but there was also a deliberate effort to downplay Iran's capabilities and silence and deplatform those who early on pointed to their efficiency after the first round of attacks between Israel and Iran. And the reason was clear. To get Trump to agree to a larger war, a media narrative of Iranian weakness, Iran's a paper tiger, it's on the brink of collapse, etc., had to be manufactured. In that context, any acknowledgement of Iran's actual capabilities, which were demonstrated in April and October 2024, were non-permissible. And that's why we're here. That's why we're here. This just came out. Is Iran becoming another forever war? John Goetsheimer and Chris Hedges, they had a conversation about this. We can take a look at it in a little bit. But yeah, goat talk over and over again. Yeah, this is reporting from some on the Iranian side. Iran is actively planning and seriously considering a ground incursion into Kuwait to seize the U.S. military base, including Camp Beering, Camp Arifjan, and Ali al-Salam Air Base, and then take 100 U.S. soldiers hostage before quickly transferring them to Iran if the U.S. continues its military campaign against Iran, per prominent Iranian analyst Mahdi Khanalizadeh and former Iranian Foreign Minister Mottaki. I don't know if this is real. I don't know how real this is. I don't know how real. I don't know. If you're asking me, does Iran have the capability to do this? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Kuwait is perhaps less protected than all of the other countries in the region, and has less overall protection. Saudi Arabia is obviously one of the immediate regional actors that could potentially defend Kuwait. The reality of the matter is, I don't think that they're going to do this. I think this is unlikely. I think it's just an empty threat for the most part. But if there's one country that is uniquely vulnerable to something like this, it would be Kuwait. Iraq obviously has its own problems with the Shia population, so they can't do anything about it. And Saudi Arabia has its own problems with the Houthis because that's another front that is opened up when the Houthis flew back from Iran to Sanaa, and the Saudis blew up the Sanaa airport. And then the Houthis responded by attacking the civilian airport in Saudi Arabia and the military air bases in Saudi Arabia, creating a unique security environment for Saudi Arabia, one that they have they've certainly experienced, one they do not want to go back to, right? The Saudis are too busy dealing with the Houthis, and therefore they're probably not going to send any troops or any military to Kuwait to defend Kuwait. So that's a threat, I guess. Overtime, Spain has dominated both the field and the football, but have yet to score, while Argentina has had multiple aggressive situations, with Spain showing restraint 0-0. Of course, Saudi Arabia is in a unique situation because they have to implement some sort of blockade from their perspective on Yemen, because if you have a direct route between Sanaa and Tehran, all of a sudden the Houthis can open up a new route to potentially receive weapons from Iran and become a much bigger security threat for Saudi Arabia. Especially if they develop capabilities or they are able to re-up and rearm and can control the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which then doesn't just present a unique security threat for Saudi Arabia on Saudi Arabia's soil, but also an additional threat for Saudi commerce, for transiting oil tankers through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. So they have their own vulnerability here as well. Khanalizadeh adds, the city that should be evacuated is not Tehran. It is Doha, Manama, Abu Dhabi, and Kuwait, warning that a flood of American blood will flow in the region, with Kuwait being considered one of Iran's principal options for the ground incursion. He says no political border will be safe and that Iran would shift to a full-scale offensive if U.S. strikes continue. I think this is just a threat. Khanalizadeh also warns joining the U.S. in a ground invasion is tantamount to a declaration of war upon Iran, with the Iranian land force prepared to punish any state that participates. Okay? Drop site news alluded to Syria letting Iran smuggle weapons through their territory to Lebanon. Do you think the Syrian leader is playing both sides? I highly, highly doubt that. Unless Turkey is playing both sides. But I also highly doubt that. Because HTS, or not HTS, but, Zelensky is, he is an American asset. He's a Turkish asset. He is, woke Al-Qaeda, woke former Al-Qaeda. There's very little indication that they would ever allow Iran to operate inside of Syrian borders. I mean, the whole point of overthrowing Bashar al-Assad wasn't necessarily to develop Syria or anything. I'm talking about like from the Western perspective. They don't give a shit about Syrians or developing Syria at all or allowing Syria to exist as a normal country. Their goal is to sever the land bridge between Iran and Lebanon so that there is one element of the logistical supply chain between Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon is gone permanently. That is the primary focus. That was the primary goal, right? So that would be highly unlikely unless Turkey decided that they want to, unless Turkey decided that they want to move a chess piece in some way against Israel somehow. I don't know. But I don't see it happening at all. And I also don't know if this conflict would expand into Kuwait. I don't know if Iran would actually directly invade Kuwait. The Islamic resistance reaffirms its commitment to directly engaging in the battle against the American enemy. Should it continue to escalate its aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, it will target all American interests and bases in the country and the region with full force and determination. In this context, we would like to point out that the Islamic resistance in Iraq has not carried out any military operations against American bases in Iraq or the region in the past few days. Yeah, there's the Iraqi resistance as well that were lasering American bases. I mean, they killed, I think there was like a French guy that they killed, if I'm remembering correctly. Like they are obviously also an ever-present threat as well. Spangol. Just wait. You're celebrating too early. It's Vargentina. Turkey threatened to provide air assistance to Iran if Kurds invaded the country as a part of a Mossad ground operation, senior Israeli officials say, reportedly what Trump meant when he claimed Turkey was on the verge of involvement in the fighting. There's a NATO base in Iraq, Kurdistan. Yeah. Is this World War III? I mean, I guess it's not the same as World War II nor World War I, but one could say that World War III is kind of happening already, I guess. I don't know. Ref Insta called it. Argentina, did I call it without even seeing it? That's crazy. I didn't even see it happen. I just said Argentina. That's unbelievable. You did this? Bitch, I'm wearing the fucking jersey. What more do you want? This is your fault? That's crazy. I'm sorry that I predicted the most obvious thing. The most obvious thing of all time. All right, let's get to the Chris Hedges GOAT talk on, is Iran becoming another forever war?
15th and 16th among U.S. service members in the war with Iran. The U.S. has also reimposed a naval blockade on Iranian ports.
This is why PBS, this is why you sponsor PBS with your voluntary subscriptions, okay? Because you get tomorrow's news today, you get the next hour's news right now. That's why the Piker Broadcasting Service is sponsored by you, the people, for you, the people, and nothing but the people. I am here to serve. The People's Broadcasting Service is entirely funded by your voluntary contributions. Please subscribe. And if we get to level 10 hype train, we get to level 10 hype train, we'll carry the flame. We haven't.
To halt its shipments of crude oil. Iran's supreme leader, in response, issued a statement calling Donald Trump's signature on the Memorandum of Understanding, which initiated the now broken ceasefire, quote, worthless and invalid, end quote, and suspended the agreement. The latest round of strikes is ominous. They include attacks by the U.S. on Iranian desalination plants, which remove salt from seawater, and power plants that provide the electricity to carry out water production. Iran has responded by bombing desalination plants in Kuwait, where U.S. warplanes are based. Nations in the Gulf rely almost exclusively on desalination plants to provide fresh water. In Kuwait, about 90% of drinking water comes from desalination, along with roughly 86% in Oman and about 70% in Saudi Arabia. There are hundreds of desalination plants situated along the Persian Gulf. The water supply for millions of people is within range of Iranian missiles and drones. Should the targeting of desalination plants continue, it will trigger a humanitarian crisis. Iran has once again closed, for the most part, the Strait of Hormuz to shipping. U.S. bases in the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan have been attacked. Iran has called on their Houthi allies in Yemen to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait should the U.S. attack Iran's power infrastructure. This would block all shipments out of the Gulf, including oil from Saudi Arabia. Trump's escalation is a huge gamble for the United States, whose strategic petroleum reserve has fallen to its lowest level since 1983. Its stockpiles of missiles and interceptors are also being exhausted. After initially projecting that the war would cost $29 billion, the Pentagon is now saying it needs $80 billion. Once indirect costs, such as increases in food and fuel prices, are added, the cost to consumers and taxpayers is about $132 billion and rising. Where do we go from here? Will the steady escalation ignite a regional war? What will the renewed fighting do to the global economy? And will a negotiated settlement at this point even be possible? Joining me to discuss the latest round of fighting in the Middle East is Professor John Mearsheimer. He is the R. Wendell Harrison Distinguished Service Professor of Political Science at the University of Chicago. Professor Mearsheimer, who graduated from West Point, was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. He is the author of numerous books, including Conventional Deterrence, Nuclear Deterrence Ethics, and Lydell Hart and the Weight of History, The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, the Israel Lobby, and U.S. Foreign Policy and Why Leaders Lie, the Truth About Lying in International Politics. So, John, before we began, you made a point that last night the United States apparently did not attack infrastructure within Iran, and you suggested that the Iranian attacks on desalination plants and oil facilities, we should add, in Kuwait, as well as the two bases in Kuwait that are staging areas for U.S. warplanes, may have functioned as a kind of deterrence. I just wondered if you could address that.
Yeah, let's just talk about the big picture here. This tit for tat strategy that has been going on for over a week now started on July 7th. And this past week, early in the week, President Trump made it clear that if the Iranians did not surrender by the end of this week, that he would then go after civilian infrastructure in Iran. He'd go after bridges, he'd go after power plants, and so forth and so on. But what happened was that at the end of this past week, he started, or the United States started, to go after civilian infrastructure. We went after bridges, we went after power plants, and we went after a desalination plant.
I think the goal for this was to basically cut off routes of transit that the military would use, the Iranian military would use to get to Keshem Island and potentially create an environment where America could invade some of the Iranian coastline, specifically in the southern part of Iran. It's still a war crime. It's still unacceptable. I'm just trying to explain to you what their reasoning is for why they were targeting critical infrastructure like this, that civilians were using, land bridges, and the like. You just made that up? I made that up. Really? You think I made this up? What's your goal here? What's your opinion here? You think they were just blowing up one specific area's bridges that connects it to the rest of the fucking country? Like, they're doing war crimes, yes, but they're also doing it for a specific military purpose, okay? This doesn't make the war crimes appropriate, especially when the easier route to take would be to implement the memorandum of understanding that they already had at the table. You kind of just shape events to your narrative sometimes, man, Law. I explained this to you when they did this at the time, when they were fucking hitting these bridges. I explained it at the time as well. It's not just my narrative. There are far smarter individuals than myself that I read that also have a similar assessment. Chatters will come in here and be like, how dare you do analysis? I came here to just watch me fucking go based over other people's commentary?
Inside of Iran. Now, what the Iranians did was they instantly retaliated against similar targets in countries like Kuwait. Furthermore, they ramped up the bombing campaign against Jordan, and they bombed Saudi Arabia for the first time in almost 4 months. So they made it clear that they were going to play tit for tat. Moreover, the Iranians made it clear that next week, if President Trump went after civilian infrastructure in a big way, they would basically shut down the flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf and out of the Red Sea and out of the United Arab Emirates, which has a very important port that's located outside of the Strait of Hormuz. All of this would be shut down. And furthermore, the Iranians would go after all sorts of power plants, desalination plants across the Middle East. So the Iranians made it clear that they were playing hardball. Now, when you look at these threats in the context of what the Iranians have actually been able to do over the past few days, in terms of hitting various targets in Jordan and in other places in the Middle East, it's manifestly clear that the Iranians have the capability to target all sorts of infrastructure inside of these Middle East states and do great destruction. And both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have run articles in recent days about how effective the missile strikes are. So I think what has happened here, Chris, and I'm just saying I think this is what happened, is that last night, which is Saturday/Sunday night, the American retaliation against Iran did not include civilian infrastructure in any meaningful way. They did not go after bridges. They did not go after power plants. They did not go after desalination plants, which they had been doing. We had been moving in that direction, but that stopped last night. And the question you have to ask yourself is, number one, why? And number two, is that a harbinger of what we think will happen in the coming week? Now, my guess is that it stopped last night because the Gulf states called up President Trump and said, you absolutely cannot go after civilian infrastructure inside of Iran, because if the Iranians retaliate, they will destroy our societies. They will wreck our power plants. They will wreck our desalination plants. And it looks like, again, just looks like Trump listened. And then that raises the question, what will Trump do this coming week? Because he has promised that he is going to unleash the dogs and go after all this civilian infrastructure in Iran. But he now knows what the consequences of that will be.
Well, he's so mercurial. Of course, it's very dangerous to predict. He could very well bomb civilian infrastructure tomorrow night. One senses he's flailing about. Of course, the entire war on Iran was built on a fantasy that didn't come to fruition, fed to him largely by Bibi Netanyahu. But it doesn't appear that there's any real strategy other than an escalation of force. And I think the naive hope that that will make the Iranians bend. But you may have another take on that.
Well, I think you're right that he signed the MOU on 17 June. And as I've emphasized on numerous occasions, on numerous platforms, that was a surrender document.
Yeah.
The Iranians won on every point. Then after signing the agreement, he decided to challenge the Iranians on the whole question of who controls the Strait of Hormuz. To me, it was very clear from Article 5 of the Memorandum of Understanding that Iran controlled the strait in the 60-day negotiating period. And then moving forward, control of the strait would be settled between Iran and Oman. That was the deal. There was nothing about the United States controlling the strait. But what President Trump tried to do was open a U.S.-dominated channel in the Gulf that got around Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz. And the Iranians said, unsurprisingly, this is unacceptable and it violates Article 5. But Trump felt confident that he could basically throw the MOU under the bus and he could engage in a tit-for-tat military strategy with the Iranians where the United States would win. In other words, he seemed to believe that we had newfound coercive leverage over the Iranians after signing the June 17th MOU. But this is delusional. Nothing has changed in the dynamics of the conflict, as we have seen over the past week or so. The Iranians have a formidable missile and drone capability, and there's nothing we can do about it. And the idea that we have a newfound advantage over the Iranians...
It's actually worse. So not only do we not have a newfound advantage that Donald Trump thinks we have, or is operating like he thinks we have, but we actually have a bigger disadvantage this time around, because the whole purpose behind the MOU, even in the most charitable estimations, if we're to assume that like these guys know what they're doing and it was deliberate, the MOU was actually fake, it was a concoction to normalize the oil prices, that would be the most charitable to the administration, right? Like they didn't have any intentions of following through on it. They just wanted a moment of respite. If that's the strategy, then that comes with the recognition that America has less leverage now than it did before the MOU, because that recognition is now the strategic petroleum reserves are diminishing to a degree that is critical. Okay? That's the problem here. So it's actually worse. Not only do we not have the military capabilities, not only do we not have any military leverage, like any military coercive capabilities against Iran, we actually have less time and less opportunity to even continue militarily engaging Iran, because The strategic petroleum reserves are about to collapse.
Iranians now that we didn't have when we signed the June 17th MOU agreement makes no sense at all.
Well, the irony is that there was huge opposition from the hardliners in Iran to essentially agree to this MOU, and that's.
I worry that this is going to go up the escalation ladder, and then Trump is going to do something crazy. Congratulations to Spain for the goal, by the way. I worry that Trump is going to let like the Israelis nuke Iran or something. I do worry about that a little bit.
This is the other issue. If there is a negotiated way out, it isn't going to look like the MOU, which was a surrender document. It's going to look a lot worse for the United States because the MOU was predicated on phases. At this time around, the Iranians are going to demand that they have about $100 billion in frozen assets. They're going to want that a release. They're going to want a lot of stuff up front.
I agree with that. I mean, there's no question that the moderates won with regard to whether or not Iran should sign the MOU on June 17th. The hardliners said, don't sign it, you can't trust the Americans. But the moderates prevailed, and then the hardliners proved to be correct. So they're now in the driver's seat as best we can tell. And it seems to me, given that we don't have any military strategy for defeating Iran, that we're going to, at some point, have to move to a memorandum of understanding number 2. And it will be the hardliners, not the moderates, who are in the driver's seat. And as I think you correctly point out, those hardliners will push forward a tougher deal for Trump to swallow. I would imagine that in addition to your point about them wanting all of those frozen assets up front, they will also demand that the Israelis get out of southern Lebanon. If you look at Article 1 of the 17 June MOU, it dealt with Lebanon. And it was very clear from that memorandum of understanding, and the mere fact that the Lebanon issue was the number 1 issue on that agenda, that the Iranians really do want the Israelis to stop bombing Hezbollah and to get out of southern Lebanon. And it could be, one can't tell for sure, but it could be that the Iranians will demand that happen before they sign a memorandum of understanding. And this, of course, will put Trump in an extremely difficult position because, as we both know, the Israelis have no interest in getting out of southern Lebanon. But the problem that we face here is that the Iranians, I think, probably have more leverage now than they had before the June 17th agreement. I would note, Chris, that I said, not publicly, but I said privately to a number of friends who I go back and forth with on this whole issue, that I thought the Iranians were foolish to sign the 17 June Memorandum of Understanding. I've long believed that the longer the war goes on, and the more oil that's cut off from the Gulf, the better off the Iranians are. And just to elaborate on that a bit, and this will put some meat on the bone when it comes to talking about what might happen this coming week. You want to remember that there were about 20 million barrels per day coming out of the Gulf on February 27th. You know, when people talk about 20% of the world's oil came out of the Gulf, that 20% represents about 20 million barrels. And since the war started, we've devolved to a situation where 7 million barrels are still coming out of Saudi Arabia and the UAE combined. So it's only, in my opinion, about 13 million barrels that have been bottled up in the Gulf. Now, where are those 7 million barrels coming out of? One is that Saudi Arabia is sending probably somewhere on the order of 5 million barrels out through the Red Sea, not through the Strait of Hormuz. And I would guess that the UAE is sending out close to 2 million barrels from Fujairah, which is a UAE port on the Gulf of Oman. In other words, it's outside of the Strait of Hormuz. So you have this roughly 7 million barrels of oil, 7 million out of the original 20 million that are still coming out of the Persian Gulf. I think the Iranians have a vested interest in shutting down the flow of oil through the Red Sea, that's the Saudi Arabian oil, and shutting down Fujairah. And there's some evidence they've already shut down Fujairah, because this will worsen the oil situation, the global oil problem that the United States and the rest of the world faces. So if the war goes on and the Iranians are able to shut down the Red Sea, which they're threatening to do, and also shut down and keep shut down Fujairah, this will work to their advantage. It will give them more coercive leverage. So all of this is to say, Chris, if Trump does up the ante this coming week and goes after civilian infrastructure inside of Iran, the Iranians will retaliate by shutting down almost completely the flow of those 7 million barrels of oil that are now coming out of Saudi Arabia and probably the UAE as well.
Let's talk about Israel. Israel has not carried out strikes in this latest round, and Iran has refrained from attacking Israel, although they did, I think the Iranians attacked the port of Aqaba, which is, of course, very close to the Israeli border. There were Israeli officials who objected to the fact that American refueling planes were stationed in Israel. Netanyahu had to override them. Let's talk about the wild card of Israel. If Israel gets pulled back into this, it does feel like Armageddon at that point.
Well, the Israelis definitely want to stay out. They'll let the Americans wage this tit-for-tat campaign. I would imagine.
Yeah. Because remember, the conditions have not changed for the better for Israel. By the end of the MOU, Iran was successfully hitting Israel by way of Hezbollah, but also directly with their own ballistic munitions. And the impact and the frequency of successive and successful hits was far higher, which means that the Israeli defensive capabilities had diminished. This is precisely the reason why it is not in Israel's best interest to join this round of attacks alongside the United States of America, because Iran will retaliate. They've shown that they will retaliate. And not only that, but Iran also retaliated against Jordan now for the last week or so. For the last 8 days, Iran has been pummeling their Jordanian anti-air defense systems. And not only that, but they're also pummeling the Jordanian offensive capabilities as well. This has made Israel's vulnerability even larger.
Imagine if a major air war started again, which is extremely unlikely. The Israelis would willingly participate. But I think the Israelis understand at this point that if they get involved in the fight now, if they get involved in the tit-for-tat conflict, then they become a giant magnet for Iranian missiles. The Israelis are surely watching what just happened in Jordan, what's happening in Kuwait, what's happening in Bahrain, and what the Iranians are promising to do in the UAE. And they fully understand that Iranian missiles invariably get through the defenses. Maybe a few of those defensive missiles, those Patriots, will knock down an incoming ballistic missile. But most of the ballistic missiles and cruise missiles and drones that the Iranians fire at those Gulf states get through. And they will get through in Israel as well. We now know that the Israelis were not very successful in shooting down Iranian ballistic missiles and drones during the 40-day air campaign, which ran from February 28th to about April 8th. Israel really got pounded. And the Israelis don't want to get pounded again. So they're perfectly content to sit on the sideline and let the Americans wage.
If Argentina strikes again, guys, you have to understand, if you're playing against Argentina, you have to do double the amount of goals. Okay? First goal always gets eliminated by FIFA. Then the second goal, they have to literally recognize. The third goal, deleted again. Fourth goal will be recognized. That's just how it is. You have to double up in your scoring. And then you have to be extra careful because there's also the other side of it. Because when it's 1-0, if you don't actually get it up to 2-0, in the last second, they will also find a penalty for Messi. If you get in the box, if you get an Argentinian player in the box, it's gonna be a penalty. I'm calling it. I'm not jinxing it. Stop being superstitious. I'm just telling you. It's pre-watch Piker. Okay, I don't even need to know that much about football to understand how Infantino's operation works, okay? Take off the jersey? Okay, calm down.
This tit for tat strategy.
The other issue is that the accuracy of the Iranian missiles and drones has increased exponentially from the inception of the conflict back to the 40-day conflict, largely because I think they're using, or it's assumed they're using, Chinese and perhaps Russian satellite systems.
Yeah, it's not just the accuracy, Chris. It's also the missiles. In many cases, many of the ballistic missiles can maneuver as they're coming down toward the target, and that enables them to dodge or avoid the missile defense systems that the Gulf states and Israel have. And I think maybe most important of all, it appears that both the Chinese and the Russians are supplying Iran with excellent intelligence as to where the key targets are. So in other words, it's not just the accuracy. It's not just that they can, put these missiles in the pickle barrel. It's also the fact that they know which pickle barrels to hit, because either the Russians or the Chinese or both of them are providing them with excellent intelligence. And, the maneuverability, the accuracy that you mentioned, and the intelligence information, you combine all those things with the fact that they have ballistic missiles that have powerful warheads, and you can see where they can do one heck of a lot of damage. And they are doing one heck of a lot of damage. And again, we don't want to underestimate that they're promising to do even more damage. And when you see what they have done up to now, and you think about the promises, you begin to say, these are credible promises. And this is why at the start of the show, I was saying to you that I think that this is why President Trump did not go after civilian infrastructure last night, and why he, and I want to underline the word might not go after civilian infrastructure this coming week. Although, as you pointed out, he is flailing around. And I think your use of the word flailing is exactly the right word. He is flailing around, and he is in desperate straits. So nobody knows for sure what he might do this week. But it does seem that if basic deterrence strategy or basic deterrence logic kicks in, that he probably won't go up the escalation ladder this week.
How much damage has Iran inflicted on U.S. bases in the region? It's all classified, so we're kind of groping.
Well, it's quite clear from what you read in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And these are newspapers that are deeply dedicated to the American cause. It's not like these are pro-Iranian newspapers, but it's quite clear what you read from these newspapers that we have suffered an enormous amount of damage on our bases. Usually the rhetoric in these newspapers is that almost all of the bases have been either badly damaged or destroyed. And of course, the Iranians have continued to go after those bases in places like Kuwait and Bahrain. The 5th Naval Headquarters are at Bahrain, and the Iranians have continued to pound those headquarters and that naval base more generally. They've continued to bomb all sorts of U.S. targets in Kuwait. Now, very importantly, Chris, just recently we started bombing Jordan. And the question you want to ask yourself is, why are we now bombing Jordan when we hadn't been bombing Jordan for most of the war?
You mean Iran? Iran is bombing Jordan.
Yes, I'm sorry. Iran is bombing Jordan. Why is Iran bombing Jordan? And the answer...
Motherfucker said we. Oop. A mistake. A mistake that I also try not to make. You can tell. You can tell which side this man is on by his Shia smirk. Look at him. Look at him doing the Shia smirk. Even Chris is doing the Shia smirk a little bit. A little baby Shia smirk from Chris.
answer is that we have moved lots of military assets to Jordan because they are so vulnerable in places like Kuwait, Bahrain, the UAE, and so forth and so on. So Jordan has become an important staging area. Well, the Iranians responded by going after U.S. targets in Jordan. And this is why they ended up killing 2 American servicemen. They've also, it appears, wounded many other American servicemen. They've attacked one base and destroyed a significant number of Black Hawk helicopters. And they have attacked the main U.S. air base in Jordan as well. And they are...
Our man Chris has resting bureaucrat face. Yes, he has resting Politburo face, which is funny because he hates the USSR. But he would be he would be like the Secretary of Agriculture in some faraway oblast in the USSR. You know what I mean? He really does look like that. Do not give this man bad news from the production line. Yes. I'm glad that it is 5 minutes. Not rooting for Messi, but just because I like the drama. No, end it. End it now. End it now.
threatening to continue those attacks on Jordan. And what the Iranians are basically saying, there is no place to hide. Wherever you go, we're coming after you. And you want to understand that we have a lethal missile and drone force, and we will use that force in very effective ways. And they have demonstrated quite clearly that they have that capability.
A lot of the air attacks have been concentrated in southern Iran. And there's been speculation that this is because the United States is considering seizing parts of Iranian territory, some of the islands, perhaps Karg Island. I don't know how they would do it. I guess they would have to do it by air. I'm not sure how that would work. Certainly they can't do it by ship. I think the Boxer is their amphibious, and that's 200 miles away or something. But how do you see that as a possibility, and how would it play out?
Well, I'll make a couple points, Chris. First of all, you have to ask yourself, how many combat troops, and here we're talking mainly about infantry and Marines, U.S. Army infantry and Marines, combat troops, people that you can use for an amphibious operation. How many troops of that sort do we have in the Gulf? Now, you'll see in the media, people say there are 50,000 American troops in the region. That's true, but those 50,000 troops are not all combat troops. And in my opinion, most of them are not combat troops. My guess is that there are at the most 8,000 Marines and Army troops from the 82nd Airborne in the region. About 8,000 combat troops at most. What are you going to do with 8,000 troops? That's a tiny number of troops. If you're seriously talking about invading a country like Iran that has 93 million people, a formidable military, represents a huge piece of real estate. I mean, this is a big territory that it covers, has forbidding terrain. What are you going to do with 8,000 troops? Not only do you have to invade with those 8,000 troops, you have to sustain them, and then you have to reinforce them. This is just not in the cards. And if you listen to President Trump talk, he says that it's not going to be American ground troops that do the invading. It's other troops from the region that are going to do the invading. The ground operation.
Hold. It's so funny that most of the chat is second screening the game. And then there's like people that are in Maine that are like, bro, Troy Jackson basically clinched up Troy Jackson is going to be the fucking candidate in Maine. No one is listening to Professor Gottheimer. Okay. It's crazy. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, of Argentina. Ladies and gentlemen.